Hello everybody, this is Brittany and Byron, and you're listening to Dirty Laundry with B&B, a podcast about real, relatable relationships.
Transparency at its finest, we air it out and clear it up, offering couples and those seeking healthy relationships a safe, inclusive space to open the vents and find resolve.
Hey, Dirty Laundry listeners. I hope that your week is going amazing. How are you doing today, Byron?
Babe, I'm doing pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, looking forward to another episode.
Yes.
Man, what are we on now? Episode like 15, 16?
Yes.
It's just crazy, right?
It is.
Yeah.
The season's like closing out on us.
It really is.
Yeah.
We did talk about that on a couple of weeks ago, right? Yeah. How the season is coming to an end. Yep. We're going to start sending out some questions here soon, asking for folks to just provide us with questions because our last episode is just going to be Ask B&B Anything. Yeah. But before we get there, there's business to be taken care of, right?
Yes.
So we have a great couple here to talk to us once again. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, we are going to be talking about dating after divorce today.
Yeah.
And we're excited and thrilled to have someone that we actually grew up with and went to school with, her and her partner, Alex and Sam.
Yeah.
You guys want to introduce yourselves? Kind of tell us how you met, your love story.
Do you want to do it? Oh, man.
I'll go ahead.
Okay.
All right. So just introduction, Sam Smart here from, grew up in mid-Missouri, a town about 15 minutes away, Fulton. So born and raised there, have family all around there, and graduated from South Callaway. And so went to college at Westminster. So really didn't get far from home. Went to grad school at Mizzou, so starting to, inch my way out, and then ended up via another relationship in the past in grad school, flew to the Republic of Georgia and lived there for about 6 years, and then spent about 8 years total outside the U.S. So I came back in 2018, and then we met in 2020, and then so that's where our paths crossed at the end of 2020.
Yeah. So I'm Alex. As you said, Brittany, we grew up together, grew up in Columbia, and I've pretty much stayed around this area the whole time. I did spread my wings a little bit and moved about 2 hours away after college, but came back and have been working in Columbia ever since. And so Sam and I, we met at the end of 2020. I was thinking 2019, but we broke COVID rules and, we're dating other people during 2020 and met on a dating app, Bumble. And then at the end of the year, I guess, we started talking the very end of 2020 and officially started dating the beginning of 21, January of 21. Yeah. Our first date, I had a U-Haul. I was moving out of an apartment. And he came over and I was like, hey, let's go to my apartment. And I have some things I need to bring back to the house I had just bought. And my apartment had been robbed. And so we had kind of an unconventional, it wasn't actually robbed. The landlord thought that I had moved out officially and people were renovating it. And so they thought that because a lot of times people will leave stuff, So we had a little bit of an unconventional first date.
I'd say so. Yeah.
So we had been talking online and having like virtual dates for a couple weeks. And then we were kind of deciding, do we want to officially start dating? So
that's crazy.
We did.
Yeah. So it was video calls, text messaging. And again, I think Alex had been, dating and so just getting back on the platforms and navigating that whole space, which is its own monster, so to speak. But yeah, you get really good at just kind of laying it all out there at the very beginning. There's not a lot of games to be played, really. You try to be as transparent and, just putting yourself out there and like, this is kind of it. And we just connected and we just kept going back and forth. And I think we watched a movie. I don't know what we did. Simultaneously watch a movie at a time.
Yeah.
Which was
Soul?
No, it was Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So anyway.
From two different places. We were trying to simultaneously stream a movie together.
Okay, so we should have called this episode Dating After Divorce / Dating During COVID.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
/ learning all of the different platforms to date. Like, shout out Bumble.
Yeah.
Like, here y'all are.
Who knew? You know, you
Right.
all obviously have been together since before anybody under the age of 40 was on platforms.
Yes.
And now here we are.
No one like runs into someone at a coffee shop or like a library, like all the movies, you know? It's not a real thing.
Oh, I mean, when I started dating again, I only work with college students and women. And so I was like, how am I going to meet people? That's the only. And yeah.
Yeah. But you know what? You said something, Sam, that was really interesting to me, how you had said that it was very important for you to lay things out there up front and being transparent. Because usually when people think about dating sites, they think about being catfished or being tricked. Yeah. How was that? Was that a difficult transition for you? Like coming from, you know, an analog type relationship to moving into the digital space and having to be transparent and open and honest. What was that like for you?
Well, I tend to be kind of an open book anyway. It's like my default setting. So I don't, you know, I probably I can tend to be an oversharer as well, but I don't know. I think a lot of it's through, I guess the messaging was first and just, I don't know, you just try to pick up on things that you have in common and like kind of this is kind of where I'm at in life and who I am. And so I didn't, you know, I don't know. I think you can kind of present yourself in such a way that, you know, the idealistic version of who you think you are, who you want to, you know, portray yourself to be. And then there's like the actual person. And, you know, the quicker you can get to that, the real self, you know, out into the world, the better. And so I think I strove to at least present myself in the most honest way possible, because it felt like if I wasn't, I was just wasting people's time. So, and you know, what's the worst that could happen, right? I mean, being yourself. So
I love that.
As much as you can. Yeah.
That's great, man. That takes a lot of self-assessment and understanding for sure, to be able to just say, you know, take me as I am. You know what I mean? And now we have Alex, who did take you as you are. Was it difficult for you, Alex, also?
We're similar in that, in kind of our openness. So we can sit down and kind of have a conversation with just about anybody and really like to learn about other people. So I think that provided the Tinder, I guess, for not the website, but the Tinder for the relationship. But for me, my motivation in some ways was I wanted to lay out the good and the bad from the get-go. I had friends that had told me previously that if I was on The Bachelor, I would get like the first impression rose, but they always get eliminated in like episode 3. And so I was like, I don't know how great that is, because then your sort of expectations are higher. If you have a great first date, expectations are then higher. And so then whenever the reality of who that person is and the messiness that they bring, it can be off-putting when you have these expectations set from the get-go versus the slow burn for people that tend to withhold a bit more. I think that there's more effort and run into that conversation. So I wanted him to know lots of the messiness, I guess, earlier on.
So how quickly did you say, like, when was it like day one that you were like, hey, this is what I bring to the table? Or were you, as you said, you wanted to say, you know, early on? Is that what you did essentially? Like, hey, this is what I am. This is what you get.
I'm not sure. I don't really know how quite that unfolded, because we had many of our first conversations were hours long. And I think we were talking about what we were looking for in relationships and challenges that we had faced in previous relationships and things we didn't want to bring into a new relationship.
Yes.
But one of the things that we started that he initiated really early on was like every week or so, we would have a check-in and we had a list of questions that we found online, and we would just go through those questions. And most of the time I would cry because it was really vulnerable. But what we got at was what was going on in our lives that we would either interpret it to be a problem in the relationship, or it was probably something going on completely outside of the relationship that then gave us insight into the other person, why they're acting a certain way, why they're communicating a certain way. And so that allowed us to like just be really open and get to know each other without sort of the pressure of inquiry, like asking a specific question and then presuming why they're asking that. And so it was a really, really helpful tool that we used.
Yeah.
And I want to ask 2 questions here. Were both of you previously married before meeting each other? Is the first question.
No.
I still not ever.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But no, I had not.
Okay, so obviously you have dated though.
His relationship was basically as longer than my marriage. Like he was in a really long-term relationship.
It was 7 years.
And the reason I asked that is because I didn't know if there was like, well, maybe just for you, Alex, like a trial period of dating other people. And I know it was during COVID time. Like, was there a time that you like tried how you were saying, like, let people know who you really are? And you were like, yeah, that was a fail. Not going to do that again. And did you kind of, was it like a lessons learned? Did you have to have a time period in there that you felt like comfortable, or was it just Sam that like gave you this feeling of like, that's the one, that's the person?
Do you want to tell my story? No, I actually dated quite a bit, I'd say, between the time that my marriage was ending and then before we met. So we met a year or so after my ex and I split. For me, dating was an important part of sort of figuring out who I actually was in a relationship and what I was looking for. I think traditional wisdom would say, like, don't jump into relationships right after you get out of a serious relationship. And I think there's some truth to that. But for me, there was it was like practice being vulnerable. And I had built up walls in a lot of ways and sort of became kind of shell of who I was just as a consequence of being in an unfitting relationship. And so that was important to me. And it helped me to kind of understand what I was looking for.
And I love unfitting. I don't think that I've heard anyone ever say that before. And I like that. I just like the way that's worded, you know? And I think too, and I can't speak for you, but I'm sure there's a moment of almost a grief or like a loss that you have to kind of get yourself through to really, is that true, to kind of work yourself through that process?
Yeah, I think that anytime a person is in a relationship, they're hoping that relationship lasts indefinitely.
Of course.
You have an image of what that future is going to hold. And so there's a grieving period. And even once you're in a new relationship that you don't know that person as deeply, I think that there is a period of not what could have been in a longing for what could have been, but in a kind of, for me, it was because I have a child, you know, you're looking ahead to the future with your child and Christmases and all of the things that come with kind of that family unit. And so the grieving for me was more of my family unit is going to look different. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean that it is lesser than other family units. It's just different.
That's right.
And so that, I think, is more the grieving that I went through. But that is a word I've used.
That's great. And then so Sam, as you all are sharing this information and you find out that Alex had, you know, a previous marriage and that also she has a child, what was that like for you?
I feel like I just took it in stride, you know, and just kind of making decisions and responding as information came in and as the relationship matured. That, you know, I think snap judgments aren't always the best, and I think they're useful at times, but I think for me it was just taking things a day at a time and kind of building and nurturing that relationship with Alex first. And then once that foundation was laid, then, adding pieces upon that foundation. So I don't have children, and I was never married. And so I, came from a kind of a different world a bit, so in some ways, and in some ways not. But I never, I think it was just a day at a time for me, and concentrating on the relationship first, and just continue to add to that, just step at a time.
Yeah. Did you feel that you had to there was some boundaries or some walls you had to navigate, being that, she does have a child and you want to respect, all that piece of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think boundary setting was a huge thing, and making sure that, that we were taking it, I think taking it at a pace where it felt okay, and it didn't feel rushed, didn't feel forced, it didn't feel like I had this idea of what this ought to be looking like. Let's go ahead and get it and put it together, manufacture something that wasn't quite ready to be manufactured or put together. So it was, yeah, I think it was just time and understanding that it was going to take time, and just being okay with saying, this isn't okay right now. I'm not ready for this right now, but let's continue down this path until it does feel okay. And I think sometimes you have to kind of step into that discomfort zone, it may feel uncomfortable regardless of how well things are going, just because it's new and it's something I had never navigated before. So I also had to consider that, at certain intervals of this timeline, that it was just going to feel uncomfortable regardless.
I really appreciate the level of intentionality the both of you have taken. Like, I want this interview to go long, but the amount of nuggets that y'all already laid on this, like, we could end it right now and people would have learned so much, just the use of a tool, as you're dating, to reference back to every week, or every month, to kind of check in on each other, and using words like foundation, the importance of setting or laying a foundation with your partner first. And then as the relationship matures, you use the word matures, then adding pieces to it. I'm getting goosebumps. And I'm an easy person to get goosebumps, but that is incredible, and I think that sometimes in relationships, we fail to be deliberate. And it is extremely important for us to take the time and the effort and to remember what our purpose is together, right? And then have those check-ins to ensure that we're still on the same page and that we're marching in the same direction. And I think too many times we just kind of let relationships flow as if we're still in that lust phase of love, right?
Right.
But I truly appreciate the words and verbs and terms that you all are using. That intentionality is so essential to a successful relationship.
Yeah, I agree. And I was just thinking too, I wanted to ask you, Alex, did divorce change your mindset on getting married ever again? Or was that something that you're still open to?
We actually talked about this pretty early on. I remember whenever we had our trip in Arkansas, we were at the coffee shop after we went on a trip shortly into our relationship, watched the entire, what is that, Blast Blowers, Blown Away. We didn't go anywhere. We just ate food, ordered in, and watched Blown Away for the whole weekend. So we were like, oh, okay, so we can have adventures, and we can just lay in bed and do absolutely nothing. But we were talking about kind of what my expectations were and what his expectations were for this relationship. And I think where I landed has been, I don't have expectations for marriage, children. If it happens, that's wonderful, but my priority is a healthy relationship. And so, kind of calling back to the previous comments that you were making, Byron, early in our relationship, I heard another podcaster, they were talking about relationships and how often we are looking so far ahead in the relationship that we fail to fall in love with the person who's right in front of us. We're falling in love with an idea of a person. We're falling out of love with an idea of a person. And that really struck me because I felt like we were doing a good job of like getting to know each other day by day and kind of taking a step forward. And then there were steps backward where we had uncomfortable conversations and we navigated those healthfully and continue to kind of come back to. There are themes of challenges that I'm sure you all have themes of challenges and we do as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been more, I don't know what's good. I don't know what the future holds, but it doesn't really matter necessarily because I know that we are a partnership and like we value each other and we value this relationship. And we just keep trying to learn more about each other and what we want and how we can do that together. And if the end of it is that we can't do that together, then that is the case. But we're just kind of taking it day by day, I think.
I love that. And it brings so much more excitement to a relationship when you're not trying to control what the future is going to hold, right? Because if we're looking at that idea that you had alluded to, Alex, if that idea never comes to fruition, it only leads to disappointment, right? And like, well, okay, what did I mess up 3 steps ago to not get us to the point where I thought we were going to be, right? So why not be excited about what's happening right now? Who cares what the future is going to look like? As long as it's with this person that I'm with, that I'm enjoying spending time with, I know that the future is going to be just fine, right? If I spend the time right here where my feet are. That's great.
Yeah. And I think your happiness, right? We get caught up in this rat race of life. Like you have to do this and you have to do this and you have to do this. Like your happiness and having a healthy relationship is 20 times more important than any of those steps. Because really, who made those steps up? They're stupid, you know? And so it's important, you know, that you take that into consideration. You create those healthy boundaries. And you're happy. So, yeah.
And we genuinely enjoy each other's company. Like we can spend a lot of time together and it's easy.
Yeah.
And that's been what's been important to me is like, I've got a friend sitting next to me that I also want to make out with.
Yeah. I like it. I like it.
That you're allowed to make out with, right?
That's true. Oh, that's great.
That's awesome. All right. So you have never been married, Sam, and you have not had a child. So now we're talking about long-term relationship and instant child, right? So, you know, what is that like for you?
What is just being part of an institution that includes a little human as well? Okay. Well, it's been good. I love kids and I've always had a way, like I just, been drawn to them and them to me. I've been a teacher. And so I really like being around little people, young people from, 3 to whatever. And so that came second nature. So it was really interesting for me. So I'm a product of a divorced family. So my parents divorced when I was 5 and almost 6. And so I had experience with blended families, as my mom married a couple of years after my parents divorced. And so I was, kind of thrown into this mix of a stepfather with 3 new step siblings. And then it was my mom and my sister and I. So it was like this blended situation. And so I think I had some imprinting that was done on, what that dynamic was between, a stepfather or an outside father figure. And I was trying to kind of navigate my own emotions with that relationship because, it was unique and challenging, growing up, for that relationship with my stepfather. And so that was an interesting confrontation of the past and understanding some of my reactions or nervousness or whatever it was, anxiety, of that potential relationship and who I was and who I wanted to be. And so it was a lot of navigating, the past in order to kind of not recreate, but just be the person I wanted to be in terms of just general kid stuff, like totally down and had a lot of fun. And I think now we've kind of transitioned to more of an authority figure. And that's been an interesting transition as well. that, I'm not, just the friend or the fun guy or the whatever it is, because I play that card really well, but stepping into that more authority figure. And so that's been a process and evolution, just kind of going through that relationship, over the last 2.5 years.
We started really slow. So we had a few hours of hanging out, and then he wouldn't stay over for another probably 6 months after that.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have any kind of overnight visits or anything like that when he was with me. And so we were very slow to kind of introduce that dynamic and kind of watched for Mason's responses and that sort of thing. And fortunately, he likes Sam more than he likes me. Sam is really fun and plays pretend really well, and I'm not as creative. So fortunately, we had that kind of, he was interested in having Sam around, and it's been pretty seamless. And now we're living together just kind of recently. And so we're entering into kind of a new dynamic there. And that, again, we're just kind of following his lead and talking with him about it and kind of preparing him for what that might look like. But we still have time, just the two of us too.
I'm blown away a little bit.
I know. It seems like you guys did a great job of making sure that everyone felt safe and happy and transitioned so well. And Sam, you mentioned you come from a divorced family. Byron and myself do as well. And I could totally relate to all the things you were saying. Yeah. And I thought to myself, when Alex was talking, I'm sure that gave you so much feel good, because you're we're taking this slow. I don't feel like I need to jump into anything. And then on the reverse side, I'm sure Alex is kind of sizing you a little bit too. Are you suitable to be around, my child and things like that, even subconsciously as a mother, And so I just love how perfectly you guys did that. And I think that's a great example.
Well, I will say that it was not as seamless as, the end of the story might make it seem like it. There were challenges in that process. And, Sam mentioned the kind of navigating some of the things that came up for him. And then for me, there was navigating what are my actual expectations, and in some ways related to that earlier comment about the family unit and this idea. And so I think both of us were wrestling with different things, and we wanted it to work. We believed that it could. And so we were having a lot of conversations as things were coming up. For me, it was unusual to navigate conflict and not feel like the conflict was indicative of a problem in the relationship, healthy conflict. And it took some time for me to be comfortable really sharing how I was feeling, because I didn't want to. I was scared, I guess. I was scared that I would be too complicated and that would then not be worth it. It wouldn't be worth it to navigate this with us. But every time we did that, then we kind of had we were closer. We got to know each other more. We got to talk more about our expectations. And so I think we just kind of keep working through that. Yeah.
That's good. So, all right. So as Brittany stated, we are both, products, also divorce. My mother never got remarried, so it was her and myself and three sisters, so 4 children. But she did have partners, plural. So, and it wasn't I'm gonna wait, a little bit or to introduce you. It was instant, new guy around, And she was young, so in her defense, she didn't really understand that. I feel like I really love, Alex, how you were purposeful. And you allowed, your son to be a part of the decision-making process. And he probably doesn't even understand, right? But you still took his feelings into account. Can I just ask, why did you do that? Why did you feel like that was important?
So when my ex and I were devising our parenting plan, at that point, I had already kind of started to date. And I was talking about possibly introducing to another person. And so really then the timeline was sort of set by his dad. And I think it's looking back, I probably was trying, I didn't introduce him to that person, but my presumption was that those first feel goods were indicative of long-term feel goods. And that, and that I think now having navigated other relationships and like seen, it takes about 6 months before somebody is really fully themselves with another person. And so the timeline kind of makes sense. But that was an agreement that his dad and I had early on in our next phase of our lives.
Yes.
Gotcha. So you all put that 6-month rule kind of in there, basically.
Yeah, I don't know that it was, I don't remember if it was a specific amount of time, but it was like around that, that
Gotcha.
6-month-ish period.
And I don't know. I mean, maybe you can speak on it. I don't know that there is a perfect amount of time, I guess to each his own, right? It depends on the children. It depends on the people. It depends on the situation.
Yeah.
I think looking back, I think that no, there's not necessarily a specific amount of time, but I also do think it's important to kind of move through that initial phase of a relationship where it is easier and people are on their best behavior and you've navigated as much conflict together and you haven't really seen how somebody behaves in different types of stress environments, because that you can drive the beginning of a relationship with dopamine and lust, right? But once you get into more of the depth of the relationship, then I think at that point you know more and you're kind of protecting your children from this is a 4, 5, 6 month situation versus this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 20-year situation.
Right.
And Sam, was any of this intimidating to you? I mean, obviously, Alex is a beautiful, wonderful woman. Were any of these things that she told you about and she was kind of, felt scared to even say some of these feelings and bring them out? Were you intimidated by them? Were you like, yeah, maybe this isn't for me? Did that ever, how did that thought process work for you on the flip side of it?
I don't know if it was intimidated. I think it was just more variables to navigate, and just it's more the complexity of it was, I think, just by the number of variables kind of increased, and so you're navigating multiple humans potentially, and each having their own perspective on the situation, and so I think it was just more to kind of sort through initially, and it took time. It took time, and I think it was just more, like, the best way to put it, just more variables to account for, and I think for me it was, I think I had a kind of a unique perspective just because I did come from a divorced family, and so understanding what Alex's ex may be thinking, because I saw firsthand what my father experienced when my mom remarried. And so, I understand that there were so many different ways in which to look at this relationship. And so that's what I would say about that.
You mentioned understanding, kind of how Alex's ex may feel, her having moved on into another, serious relationship. Is there a relationship there between you and him? Do y'all talk at all?
I would say it's amicable, but there's no lines of communication established between him and I.
Yeah, and that is a unique piece of dating after divorce. Whereas in every other relationship, the individual's exes are not they're not in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
But especially when there's a child involved, there is, I recognize that Sam's in a position that I don't even have to navigate, because he doesn't have an ex in the picture and I do. And then we have then in navigating kind of the lines of authority and all of that with that piece, I think, is a unique part of that. Nobody is ever going to be prepared for that, right? Like
Right.
until you've done it, there's no guidebook. And I actually didn't. My parents are still married. They've been married for 40 some odd years, and so I didn't have any understanding of what he was bringing in to the
Right.
picture. So I was only going by my blindfolded, let's try to figure out how to navigate what's next.
Yeah. So how are your parents, like them having had a marriage for 40 years, how are they, I want to say digesting, your current status, but do they
That's a good
have
point.
advice or questions or, okay, how
Are they
can we assist?
supporting?
Or yeah, do they support, what's going on? What does that look like?
That's hard to say. And I'm not saying that in a sense of like they're not supportive, because they are supportive and they love Sam. And like we have he's in the fold and I'm in the fold in his family. They also had difficulty understanding my decision. It takes conversations when other people are not intimately involved in your relationship. They don't know the challenges that you're facing. And a lot of, I've learned, a lot of people put on a face in public that maybe isn't their private experience. And there's not always massive conflict when relationships aren't made to work. And so there's not always something that is this big thing that is going to be obvious to everybody. So I think that it took time for them to recognize kind of where I was at and why it was important for me to be the best person and mom that I could be, to be in a healthier relationship.
Yeah. And they're from a different generation too, right? They felt the need that they probably had to get married or they had to stay together. And I'm not saying that they're not happy. I don't know. Like, I'm not going to make assumptions, but there are a lot of people that we know in that generation that are like, you can't fail. You just hang in there. And like, no one is doing that anymore. Why would we do that? Why would we sacrifice a life of misery?
Yeah.
That's just not worth it. And I'm not saying you're miserable either, Alex. I was just saying, like, in general,
Right. Oh, you're right. 100%.
I don't want to speak for you.
Yeah. And Alex said it. I mean, you said that, a relationship that isn't made to be. Like, that means that you've put effort into trying to make this relationship work. And unfortunately, it's not. Right. Mm-hmm. And so that, and we say it all the time, like, being in love and staying in love is a choice. It is. And it takes steps and deliberate conversations and communication and effort to make sure that it stays put. And to your point, Brittany, like in past generations, that's not what it was. You got married and you stayed, and that's just what it is. So, I mean, kudos to you. It had to have taken a lot of strength. And because we've talked about it too, like we didn't know how to have a successful marriage because we didn't know what that looked like. Right.
Yeah, so we're like on the opposite side.
Right. And like, and you've seen it, right? So you've seen some, your parents have been married for 40 years. So that had to have been a difficult decision for you to have made also.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of strength from your standpoint, for sure.
And I feel like too, I can totally see, Alex, how you're saying, like, there's all these pieces, like an onion, you just peel back in every relationship. And there's so many pieces. And like, it's not necessarily that's one thing, but maybe over time you lost something in yourself that you were not okay with. You're like, that's too far. We've taken it too far now. And I just don't want to be there. I want to find happiness. So kudos to you for doing what is best for you and your son, because that's a beautiful thing. And it takes strong people to make those decisions, and kudos to your relationship now, because you guys have both been so transparent with one another and so open and accepting. And from what I'm hearing, I don't want to speak for you, but what I'm hearing is that you kind of took all the things from your previous relationships and you made sure that you were like upfront and honest when you came into this one, and kind of seems to make your love story what it is.
Yeah, I would agree. And I want, before, not to cut you off there, but just going back to because just in like transparency and, you said, was I intimidated? And I feel like my answer, I came off a bit, oh, there's some variables and we had to take it. It was, I would say it was very overwhelming. I was very overwhelmed, very emotional. It was tough. And so I don't want to, it's like, well, it's just, calculated. We're doing this thing and it's fine. No, it was very overwhelming, and it took a lot of conversation and a fair amount of stress associated too. So it wasn't just, you know, I just
No.
wanted to make sure that was.
No,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing that. That is so important because like you all have already stated, like though you guys look to be like just extremely happy and just you're figuring it out and you all have like just a great foundation laid, there still are challenges that have to be maneuvered through, right? And so we appreciate you sharing that. You had to have been, you had to have been. I think I would be.
Yeah.
And kudos to you. I mean, we got to stop using the word kudos. We got to come up with a different
know.
one. But I think that, because that's difficult, for you to come in from your single lifestyle, and to, enter into a long-term relationship with someone who already has a child. And I understand that like sometimes people look at that as a negative connotation, but for me, and it sounds like for you as also like, that's kind of exciting, especially you have already having, good relationships, with children too. So that's amazing.
And we went and well, how many times did we talk to your therapist? Once? Yeah. So right after, kind of right before that introduction, we sat down with a therapist and had a conversation, and it was helpful for us to talk through those boundaries, like what in expectations and what was a reasonable expectation and what was crossing the line. So no, it wasn't easy.
Do you feel like you're getting to that point though, where things are starting to get a little bit smoother? You're understanding, what those boundaries are, and they're kind of becoming second nature?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, that's what 2 years or so ago, and so it's kind of just like a one step, one step at a time, and what are we looking for, and what do we need from each other, and how can we create a healthy partnership where we're two independent people we're very different in a lot of ways. We have a lot of similar values, but our lives prior to being together are very different. As he stated, like he's lived all over the world and has kind of untethered and adventurous spirit, and I am from here and I'm rooted. And so there is that decision that he's made that I also have to acknowledge that there's still a person here that has that interest in going out and doing things. And so then, there's just like ways we can be independent and also a partnership.
There's that story of like the redwoods, right? And now all of them, they're independent trees with these huge roots. But the reason why they are able to grow so wide and so tall is because they work interdependently. All of the roots are intertwined. So to your point, like the importance of kind of giving a little bit too. And people hate the word of compromise. Like we love the word like collaborating and trying to, include our lives with the other. And that's huge. There is a couple in my life that they were two independent people, and now they're married and they're still very independent. And they're trying to, again, navigate that and trying to understand, okay, what one is like a hermit crab and the other one is like
Super
the Energizer
yeah.
bunny, right? Yeah. So they're trying to figure out, okay, at what point can I or should I like get out of the house so I can compromise, right? But it's like, it's not compromising. That's the exciting part about being in a relationship is that you get to experience new things. So she might want to stay in the house and hang out with you. That's a new thing for her. And you might want to go out and do something new. That's a new thing for you. But yeah,
or you might have to, right?
Yeah.
You have children, you don't know. Sometimes you have to stay in the house, you
Right,
know?
right.
It's just, it's what it is.
So that's good that you all are understanding that and you guys are kind of running with it. That's awesome.
Yeah. I know. So do you guys have any tips or things that you would suggest to anybody that is trying to date after divorce?
I don't know how to be very succinct, so I will try to be succinct. But I think the two things that I think I have learned that I will tell to anybody who's willing to listen is one, doing one of those check-ins early in a relationship. It's really hard when you have an established relationship and there's already kind of budding conflict. There's those things that have kind of festered under the surface. It's hard after that starts to begin that practice. I think it's still valuable, but it's hard because there's presumptions made about intentions and things like that. But early in a relationship, I think having some kind of check-in practice where it's a standard set of questions, the thing that helps with is if I ask Sam, how was your day? You seem to be off today. He could interpret that as I have expectations of him to act a certain way or to do a certain thing. Or if I just say, how was your day today? And then he responds curtly or whatever it is, I can make assumptions that it's something that I did. But with a standard set of questions that you're going to, it opens up the conversation where there's no assumptions as to why a person's asking something. It's just there. It's neutral. You start at a neutral ground. So that would be, I think, one thing. And then the second piece is just kind of not trying to look so far ahead, not trying to make the future happen now, but like really getting to know the person that's in front of you and being as open and honest as possible as things come up so that then they're falling in love with you and you're falling in love with them as they are now. And I think that breeds a situation where you're growing together and you're not jumping ahead.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And I took some tips and thought of some tips while you all were speaking as well. And what I heard was be honest up front about everything, about your past, kind of what you have, manage your expectations, recognize kind of your readiness in the relationship and where you stand. Sometimes you have to grieve and just take your time to heal and then, create those healthy boundaries. That's what I heard. That's what I wrote down.
You were like a ninja. I didn't even see you writing anything. What are you doing?
Yeah.
I'm good at this, Alex.
What I got from the story, from both of your stories, is just taking ownership of your happiness.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be very difficult for you to make certain decisions based on external perceptions and opinions, but it's important that you take ownership on your happiness. Make those difficult decisions and know that you're doing it for the betterment of yourself and for the ones that you love and that count on you. And man, the story has been great. So I appreciate y'all sharing that.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's wonderful.
I think the thing is just not only being honest with, your person, being honest with yourself, which is, I think, maybe the biggest challenge in life, is being brutally honest with yourself. And because if you begin to, if that's a bit skewed, then the honesty that you kind of share is a bit skewed. Then all of a sudden, the relationship is a bit skewed because you're a mirror of expectation, and then things become kind of wonky because like whoever you were initially has been, it's been a kind of a house of mirrors situation where you don't know what is up and what is down. And so I think it's just extremely important. Just be honest and communicate regardless of what you may think, how that may hurt or help the other person. You don't need to protect anyone. You just have to be honest and put yourself out there and not try to force it and just let it be. So I think honesty and just be honest. Just be honest.
Yeah.
And that's the key for every relationship, right?
I have a hard time necessarily with being honest, but trying to control her emotions. Like, if there's information that I want to share or something that I need from her, like I try to say it in a way that can kind of not allow her to feel a way that I don't want to see her feel, right? So I think just the best way of navigating that is just to be honest. Like, just say what you're feeling and then allow them to have the emotions that they're going to have, right? And then trust them enough that they're mature enough to, communicate with you. And I'm speaking to myself.
And I was like popping in my head. Excuse me. There was a time where we got orders to Wichita Falls, Texas, which you guys is like a podunk town. It was not. I was not
shout
excited.
out Wichita Falls, Texas. Yeah.
But we were supposed to be going to, I think it was Colorado, right? We're supposed to be going to Colorado.
Yes.
We were guaranteed to go to Colorado from California. And we're so excited. And we're at lunch and Byron's like, yeah, we're not going to Colorado. We're going to Wichita Falls. And I'm like, we're at a restaurant. And I'm like, are you kidding? I thought he was joking. I just started bawling at the table.
Literally
and he's like, oh my
cried.
God, these people are going to like.
Literally cried.
Yeah.
And it took me so long to share that information with her because I did not want her to feel that way. But I just had to.
At the end of the day, which turned out to be just fine.
It was
and we
great.
made a lot of good friends and it was wonderful.
It was good.
But when you told that story, I was like, oh, like that one time.
Now, this was a move to Wichita Falls?
Yeah, so we're military, so we move a lot. And so it was Wichita Falls. We were going to Shepherd Air Force Base at that time.
Yeah.
We were only there 2 years. It wasn't bad. It was actually turned out to be okay.
We were living in, beautiful Northern California, just north of San Francisco, right outside of Napa Valley. We were out there for 5.5 years, looking forward to going to Colorado Springs / Denver, Colorado, right in that area. So like, oh man, we get to keep living this, West Coast type lifestyle.
Yeah, we loved it out there. Our kids were there.
Yeah.
But when you told that story, I thought of that though. It was like, me not handle my emotions.
This is why, right? This is why. Yeah.
So, growth.
When you're crying in public, you're like, I'm a good guy.
That's exactly. He was like, these people are gonna think I just like beat you, abuse you, something.
Gosh.
I'm like, no, we're just moving to a terrible city. It's fine.
I'm a crier, and there were a lot of times where he was like, "You've got to stop. You've got." He's like, we're not even having an argument. Like I would get emotional just talking about growth, self-growth, and he's like, you gotta tone it down. No more IPAs for you.
There you go. Them hops will get you every time.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, man. Thank you guys so much for doing this and being so open and honest about this. This is not an easy conversation to have. I'm sure you guys have it in the privacy of your own home, but just talking about it and being so open, we really appreciate it. I mean, that's what our platform is about.
Yeah. And what happens often is that we'll have questions and people say, hey, we want to hear more. Hey, how did they navigate this specific situation? So just be ready for that. So we'll be reaching out to you all with some of those questions and comments for sure. But yeah, again, to Brittany's statement, like you guys have been awesome and very helpful. I mean, as I already said, like the first 3 minutes of this interview, you guys dropped bombs on folks. So such great advice and we appreciate your time. We really do.
It's awesome.
Thanks for having us. We're hopeful, can help somebody else navigate their relationship too. So,
yeah.
And thanks for what you're doing.
Yeah. Thank you all so much. Truly. You create a really great space. Love the space y'all created.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. It means a lot.
That's awesome. Well, I think that's a wrap for this episode.
That's good. All right. Hey, thank you all again for tuning in, Dirty Laundry listeners. Again, so much fun, and we're so grateful for having y'all on this platform. As stated all the time, I mean, this is a space for open, honest communication and transparency. Hoping that you all are enjoying the platform. Please leave comments, like, subscribe, whatever that stuff is that the little kids say these days. But yeah, just feel free to reach out to us anytime with questions, comments that y'all have for us. Without further ado, y'all know what it is. Be blessed, be you, just be. We're out.
I'm blessed to be me. I'm so blessed to be